Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have the latest from the live radar, run for the UKV, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days, as we are going to see some really changeable conditions through this week with some colder weather in places over the next couple of days with overnight frosts and a bit of snow over the higher ground in the north, and then it'll turn a bit milder towards the end of the week. This sort of changeable pattern where it's colder for a few days, milder for a few days of dry conditions, and then a few days of wet and windy is likely to dominate as at the end of November and probably the start of December as well. It does look like, as we'll see from the longer range charts, that it is a little bit all over the place as we head into early November with no real distinct pattern taking hold. Now, if you're looking for cold weather, that also means, we'll unlikely see anything majorly cold, but equally, we're unlikely to see anything really mild or any of those sort of pests from the west patterns where it's just repeated low pressure systems coming in off the Atlantic. As I said, a very changeable pattern and does leave the door open as we head into mid-December. We'll have a winter look ahead out tomorrow, and it does show some interesting signs, as I've already recorded it, for mid to late December. Definitely is on board with the changeable conditions, but potentially shows the blocking and cold could return. So do make sure you watch that through Tuesday. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe. And remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. Now, after you start on the live radar, the remnants of Storm Bert have now pretty much fully cleared, and we're now into more of an Atlantic, cool North Atlantic air mass, if we're being specific. You can see we've got rain coming in from the northwest, a bit of snow over the high ground, and there'll be a bit more snow over the next couple of days, as we do see some pretty chilly polar maritime air digging in. There's nothing too major, not quite as cold as it was last week, and of course the cold air is nowhere near as extensive, especially towards southern areas. But it is cold enough to give chilly conditions in the day, mid to high single digits at best, and overnight frost for many through especially Tuesday night and Wednesday. We are, as I said, going to see some rain around, but equally we are going to see some dry conditions this week. You can see rain is, coming in from the north at the moment, and lots of these hefty showers coming in from the northwest, but no real big walls of rain left. It is going to be just on and off showers, but with the flooding we've seen over the past few days from Bert, some of these heavy showers could exacerbate those impacts, but I'm not expecting anything too major in the coming days. Now, if you look at the temperatures, you can see it is definitely colder, especially the further northwards and westward you go, slightly milder further than southwards and eastwards. And you can see the big mild wedge associated with the storm Bert, very cold ahead of it towards Eastern Europe, slightly chillier behind it toward the west, as this is where we've got that wedge of warm mid-Atlantic air. So we are in fresh conditions, but nothing too cold over the coming days. Now, do look at the latest UKV. You can see all those showers clearing through over the course of this evening. And as we head into Tuesday, a few snow showers in the north and showers elsewhere, but nothing too major. And it's actually a pretty dry day, especially into the afternoon. Plenty of sunshine and looks fairly pleasant. Now, as we head into Tuesday evening, we could see an area of rain moving up from the south. This would potentially give heavy snow if the air to our north is a little bit colder, but because the air to our north and sort of drifting in is a couple of degrees below freezing at the upper air level, just not quite cold enough for snow, it's just going to mean we're going to see cold rain through much of Tuesday evening into Wednesday morning. And that will clear, and it does leave remnants of cloud, but mostly through Wednesday it's another pretty dry and pleasant day. The morning for many through Wednesday morning will be pretty cold, especially in the north. We've got overnight temperatures well below freezing, and the same can be said for Wednesday night into Thursday, before eventually this brief ridge of high pressure with that colder air does get pushed away, and we do see more of an Atlantic flow returning by the end of the week, where we see a bit more rain and thicker cloud. So it's very variable conditions this week. Some colder conditions, some harder conditions, some wet and windy conditions, but equally plenty of dry weather. And you can see the upper air temperatures are turning chillier at the moment, and that's why we're going to see overnight frost potentially through Tuesday and Wednesday. And you see pretty cold air mass moves in for the north, but for most, apart from sort of Scotland, it is chilly, but nothing as cold as it was last week. A good few degrees mild at the upper air level. And I know that doesn't sound like a massive difference, but it does make all the difference towards the surface. Now, as we do head towards Tuesday into Wednesday, this is where you see that milder wedge bumping into the cold air, where we see potentially some hefty rain, a bit of a channel low in the south. Again, if the air masses were 3 or 4 degrees colder, a lot of this would be snow. But of course, pretty typical, the one time we do see a channel low, the cold air isn't quite there. But you can see the cold air does wrap back in for Wednesday, but eventually gets pushed away as we head into the latter parts of the week, and we see some very mild air moving in for the weekend. Now, if you look at the max temperatures, you can see today it was generally around average, high single digits towards the low double digits, and overnight tonight a frost in the north and west in a few spots, but most mid to low single digits. Into Tuesday, it's a chilly day, widely sort of mid-single digits, maybe high single digits further southwards. So, a fairly average winter day, but remember, we are still in November, so it is a little bit below average, but nothing too major, not quite as cold as I said as last week. Now, overnight, Tuesday, look at it, it's very cold, especially in northern regions. We've got clearer skies. For those southern areas, we've got that heavy rain moving in. It is cold, 4-5 degrees, but not quite cold enough for snow. So it is going to be chilly conditions. It's going to be some very cold rain, and if you are out and about around that time that rain moves in, it is going to feel very cold, but not quite cold enough for anything too wintry. Now, through Wednesday, it's going to be another chilly day. Northern areas might not get much above freezing for Scotland, but most will be kind of 4 to 7 degrees. So getting closer to what we saw last week, but not quite towards those sort of 2 or 3 degree temperatures we saw last week. You can see, though, through the evening, widespread frost. So it is going to be a pretty harsh frost there as we head into Thursday, really quite cold night. But again, we are heading into winter, so these sort of cold nights are quite likely whenever we see clearer skies and fresher air masses. Now into Thursday, it's going to be another chilly day, more inclined with what we saw last week, only 3 or 4 degrees in some spots, but very quickly into Friday, milder temperatures do move in. You can see again, back towards the high single digits by the afternoon, and Saturday I'm expecting temperatures to be back into the double digits. So you can see it is very changeable this week. Good couple of days of colder conditions, especially in the north, but even the southern areas, a good night or two of frost. Again, as we head into the winter period, it's not too unusual, but given some of the incredibly mild conditions we've seen over the past few winters, a kind of a bog standard chilly spell like we're going to see this week, have been few and far between, if we're being completely honest. It's either been really cold or it's been generally mild. We've not had a lot of those sort of in-between conditions, and that's exactly what we're seeing this week. Nothing record-breaking cold or anything major, not cold enough for snow, but chilly. Temperatures in the day will be cold, hat and gloves weather, and it will be frosty overnight, but as I said, not quite cold enough for any proper wintry hazards. Now, if you look at the latest GFS, see what is in store over the next few weeks, you can see the remnants of birds moving away through this evening. High pressure builds in with a slight northerly flow, and that does give that precipitation in the south. There's this little channel low developing, but for most, under the high pressure, chilly air mass, it is generally cold, but nothing crazy. Beyond that, eventually westerly winds do push back in into next week, the first full week of December. Again, we can see changeable conditions between high pressure and low pressure. The jet stream is slightly southerly tracked, so it is going to keep those temperatures around average, maybe below average at times, maybe above average. And you can see there is going to be lively conditions, storm systems potentially moving in there. But equally, high pressure does nudge in for a time. And towards 384 hours, you can see this with a bit of an amplified jet stream, but nothing too major. So you can see the GFS, nothing really too out of the ordinary. No real one pattern dominating. Now, that doesn't mean a pattern won't emerge in the next few days, but from the latest data we've got, it looks very changeable. Could see some unsettled conditions at times, but not really dominating too much. Equally, could see some higher pressure, drier and colder at times as well. And you see, for example, at this point, we've got quite a lively low pressure system moving in, but because the jet stream is slightly southerly tracked, we are in some fresh air. Nothing amazingly cold, but you see it's slightly below average, a few degrees below average. Temperatures at the surface would probably only be mid to high single digits. So you can see very changeable, chilly at times, but equally we would see some milder conditions. Now, if you compare it to the GM, very similar over the coming days with that high pressure nudging in, and eventually towards the end of the week we do see those westerly flows. A little bit more Atlantic blocking up towards Greenland perhaps, so we do have the risk of some very cold air trying to push in at times, but we've not got a sustained block, so it's unlikely to really prevail. And towards day 10 again, we're oscillating between colder and milder sectors. Still plenty of blocking towards the northern hemisphere, so this is the sort of run where again nothing actually immediately happens, but definitely opens the door to something colder in the week or two beyond that. And that's definitely what we're kind of seeing in those winter look aheads, winter look ahead charts that we're going to look at tomorrow. So very similar to this GM, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. But GM, as said, it's not cold, it's not mild, it's kind of in between with oscillating conditions. But the northern hemisphere is still pretty blocked and is very close, if a proper area of high pressure got going, to deliver something more sustained, cold and wintry potentially, especially with this big blob of blue and purple towards Scandinavia. That's a big lobe of tropospheric polar vortex. Any high pressure gets going towards Iceland or Greenland, we would be plunged into the freezer in the lead up to Christmas. Now finally, if we compare to the latest ECMWF, this is the midnight run, as the midday run hasn't come out yet, unfortunately. But you can see again, we got that brief area of high pressure in this week. Low pressure returns next week, but not in as much of a capacity as the other runs are showing. High pressure actually kind of holds on here. A bit of a southerly flow, so if we do look at the upper air temperatures, it is a bit of a milder pattern, but nonetheless, it probably would still have some frost in the east with lighter winds. And then towards day 10, it's very similar, very changeable conditions. Similar to the GM, we have got a low tropospheric polar vortex towards Scandinavia, but it's more a displacement than kind of a split, which is what we were seeing in the GM. When I mean split, I mean the polar vortex is kind of all together. If we look at the northern hemisphere view, you can see it is clumped all together. A few lobes are coming off, but if we were to see anything majorly cold, you'd see that sort of split apart and proper blocks taking over. And if you have a look at the GM here, for example, you can see that we have got those lobes splitting apart with higher pressure. So although similar in terms of having very cold air towards northern Scandinavia, the overall northern hemisphere synoptic pattern is pretty different in terms of any high pressure moving around. So even though it does look a little bit encouraging there for cold air masses being close by, it probably wouldn't deliver anything imminently unless we saw some high pressure getting going very quickly towards Greenland. Now, to finish by looking at the latest ensembles, this is the latest GFS midday run, which is just coming out. Again, it goes out to the next sort of 14 days or so, and you can see it's slightly below average over the next few days. Above average towards the weekend, the start of next week, and then we get back towards average, oscillating above and below into the longer term with medium amounts of precipitation. So nothing huge, but nothing minimal either. So again, just kind of reiterates those changeable conditions, not really deviating much beyond a few degrees from average. Yes, this weekend it's going to be a lot milder, but again, I'm not expecting anything, drastic, maybe low teens at best. So we're not expecting anything too far from average. Again, it's 4 or 5 degrees above average by the weekend, and back towards average for the following week. You can see the 2-meter temperatures are going to be hovering around the high single digits, maybe low double digits toward the weekend and start of next week. But you can see there is quite a big discrepancy toward those temperatures next week, and that's probably because under a bit of higher pressure, we could see an inversion taking place. Even though the upper air temperatures are pretty mild, at the surface it could be cold. But again, that will all depend on positioning of higher pressure, which we'll decipher in the coming days. But generally, average temperatures over the coming week or two. Precipitation, moderate, but nothing too major. Now, to finish by looking at the latest ECMWF, this is the midnight run. Of course, midday hasn't come out yet. You can see the coming days a little bit below average. A slight little bump in those temperatures towards Wednesday, and that's that small warm sector with that channel low moving through. Some quite heavy precipitation there. Only if we were a few degrees colder, there would be some quite heavy snow associated with that. But pretty much a 0% chance. We're not seeing any rumblings from that from the models at all. Beyond that, it's very similar to the GFS, slightly above average through the weekend, but pretty dry with higher pressure, and then hovering back towards average, slightly above and slightly below, with moderate amounts of precipitation. And the 2-meter temperatures, again, are fairly similar, hovering around the high single digits. Of course, it will be cooler further northwards. So yeah, pretty bog standard end of November, early December conditions, some frost and some fog and chilly conditions around, but equally some wet and windy and milder conditions to be sprinkled in there as well. So nothing too major, nothing too disruptive coming up over the next week or two. Big change to what we've seen over the last 10 days or so, where it's been very disruptive with very cold weather, snow, and then eventually Storm Bert with flooding, rain, and also a bit more snow. So yeah, a bit of a complete reversal at the moment, but I think we do need it after the last week to 10 days. But as I said, check out that winter look ahead tomorrow. It's our final one prior to the actual winter period starting. And yeah, it is very interesting for the lead up to Christmas, and especially the week of Christmas, as we are seeing a fairly strong signal for some northern blocking to return. And again, that could lead to more disruptive weather in the second half of December, because for the time being, at least the first sort of week or so, looks fairly mundane. So thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.